Hello, everybody, and welcome to my channel. And I'm here to review the March 1980 issue of Inside Wrestling. So let's get to reviewing. Of course, always the table of contents. In Editor's Notebook, Peter King talks about Lou Albano and how he thought he deserves Manager of the Year instead of Arnold Skaaland. But Peter just talks about all the bad and stupid things Captain Lou did over the year. On the Road with Gary Morgenstein, he just talks about how Ricky Steamboat might have been blackmailed, and he believes that Paul Jones was the person that did it. Body slams and pinfalls by Dan Shockett, and he just talks about how everybody constantly underestimates NWA World Champion Harley Race. They talk about how Harley Race lost the championship to Dusty Rhodes, but they don't really talk about how he got it back and how he lost it to Giant Baba, but he got it back. That's just how they just constantly underestimates Harley Race, and Dan Shockett said you should never do that because Harley Race is too good to be underestimated. Behind the dressing room door with Stu Stacks, he just talks about Tim Woods, the original Mr. Wrestling, and how he believes wrestling is so pure and clean and how it should be, and he gets mad when all the rule breakers does all the stuff that they do, and he decided he might not put on his Mr. Wrestling mask anymore because he just doesn't believe he doesn't believe that the pureness of wrestling is the same anymore, and he's very distraught over that. The Insider by Steve Farhood talks about how Dory and Terry Funk tried to get joined together and hold up the promoters and try to go against the promoters, hold the promoters up, but the promoters realized that if they all got together, they could stop the Funks. Back issues of Inside Wrestling and back issues of The Wrestler. Sincerely Yours, where fans write into the magazine. There's a picture of Bob Backlund versus Harley Race from 1976 and a picture of Kim Patera. Names making the news. This talks about how right before press time of this magazine, Buddy Rogers left the Mid-Atlantic area, and Ric Flair is bragging about how he finally ran Buddy Rogers out of the promotion. Also talks about Bobo Brazil in a feud with Leroy Brown in Florida. Talks about Jerry Lawler trying to get a title shot against Nick Bockwinkel. Back issues of Boxing and Wrestling and TV Wrestling, a bunch of the old magazines from the 50s. Ric Flair vs. Buddy Rogers, the battle for wrestling survival. Now, this is the original Nature Boy versus the second coming Nature Boy. Two future legends. And it talks about this. Once Ric Flair admired Buddy Rogers. Out of respect, he patterned his style after Rogers. He named himself after Rogers. Now he feels obligated to rid the sport of Rogers before the sport no longer exists. Now here they talk about how Buddy Rogers used hypnosis to hypnotize Jimmy Snuka and Big John Studd into joining his stable. And Ric Flair is against that. I never heard about this. I heard little bits and pieces about the Ric Flair versus Buddy Rogers feud that, as short as it was, but I didn't hear anything about, being hypnotized being part of the act. But anyway, Rick is trying to get revenge on Buddy Rogers for hypnotizing Jimmy Snuka and Big John Studd. Interview with Tommy Rich. I'll bleed to keep my belt. And this is after Tommy Rich won the Georgia Heavyweight Championship, and how he'll do anything. He'll get as bad as the bad guys will to keep his title. Tommy Rich was one of those guys that the magazines really loved, but he just never stayed in shape. He just kind of, I don't know if he ever went to the gym, but if he would have just stayed in great shape, he could have been a top guy for a long time. Cause I think he was like a real big star from like 1980 to like maybe 85, 86. Then he was done. And it's like that dude had so much potential, but I guess he didn't take it seriously or whatever. I don't know. News from the wrestling capitals, where correspondents write about the matches they saw in their areas. Bob Backlund versus Bobby Duncum from New York. Tim Woods versus Jimmy Snuka from North Carolina. Harley Race versus Tommy Rich from Warner Robins, Georgia. Blackjack Mulligan versus John Studd from Virginia. Ivan Putski versus Swede Hansen from New York. And Jim Brunzell versus Dewey Robinson from North Carolina. Matt Brock's Plain Speaking talks about Stanley Lane, and Brian St. John. I never heard of this group before, but Stanley Lane is eventually, Stan Lane from the Midnight Express Fabulous Ones era. I never heard of Brian St. John before, but apparently they were a big team in Florida at this time, and Matt Brock is not a fan of them. They also talk about Pat Patterson having his contract sold from the Grand Wizard to Captain Lou, and how Patterson didn't like that, and eventually Captain Lou turning on Pat Patterson, and Pat Patterson becoming a good guy. How his own manager betrayed Bobby Duncum. The price tag on Pat Patterson's contract was reduced by $400,000 when Lou Albano agreed the Grand Wizard to have Bobby Duncum challenge for Bob Backlund's WWF title just prior to Ken Patera's challenge. That would leave Backlund softened. But where does that leave Duncum? Well, this was how Captain Lou agreed to let Bobby Duncum wrestle Bob Backlund and soften him up for Ken Patera. But Bobby is like, well, why I want the title? Why are you letting me soften him up for somebody? I want the title myself. So there was an investigation of that from Peter King and Stu Sachs, saying that Bobby Duncum should really watch out and not trust Captain Lou. This is the official ratings from it's a lot different than it was, the older magazines ratings page looked a lot different then than they do now. So Terry Funk leaves Florida. Can the damage be undone? The entire state of Florida remains stunned. Terry Funk is no longer in the area, but his effects linger. The gunslinger has departed, but the guns he left behind still smoke. And this is just basically about Terry Funk coming to Florida and wreaking a bunch of havoc. How he jumped Dusty Rhodes before his title match against Harley Race, and he injured Dusty, and Dusty wound up wrestling Harley Race and losing the title. So just Terry Funk causing havoc, Terry Funk doing Terry Funk things, basically. And it's here he's wrestling Sweet Brown Sugar, a.k.a. Skip Young. A wrestling capsule profile on Bob Duncum. Where Are They Now? Of Austin Idol, Dwayne Robinson, Hulk Hogan, and the Mills Mascaras. And this was done because wrestlers went to different territories, and if you watched on TV, you didn't know where they were. So this was kind of just an update on wrestlers just going to different territories. One-on-one of Blackjack Mulligan versus Big John Studd, where they're allegedly arguing on the phone with each other. They're talking to each other on the phone, and the conversation was recorded by the magazine. So just Big John Studd and Blackjack Mulligan going back and forth against each other on the phone. Insider, continuation from the Insider, and they talk about rumor versus fact, and how there was a rumor that George the Animal Steele had officially retired from wrestling to join a convent, which was obviously a rumor. And a continuation of the Ric Flair versus Buddy Rogers. I know I know at least one of their matches is on YouTube. I wish I would like to know more about the feud and stuff. Because apparently Buddy Rogers didn't stay there that long. But I guess he wrestled Rick a couple of times. I don't know how many times he actually wrestled Rick, but they did wrestle. But I would like to know the whole entirety of the feud. Continuation of the Bobby Duncum story. Continuation on the Road, where apparently Paul Jones was blackmailing Ricky Steamboat with false information, of course. Body slam, continuation of body slams and pinfalls, where Dan Shaka just talks about how people constantly underestimate Harley Race. And after he lost to Giant Baba, but he got the title back. He lost to Dusty Rhodes, but he got it back. And just Harley Race is too good to be underestimated. Behind the Door continuation just talks about Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods, and how he just feels helpless and just distraught over the rule breaking that's going on in wrestling, and how he might never put on a Mr. Wrestling mask again, because he just feels like the wrestling business doesn't deserve it since it's so crooked now. Continuation of Sincerely Yours, where the fans write letters to the magazine. Back issues of Sports Review Wrestling. Continuation of Sincerely Yours. And a continuation of the storyline of Crazy Terry Funk being Crazy Terry Funk in Florida. And a continuation on one-on-one between Blackjack Mulligan and Big John Studd talking to each other on the phone. This has been a review of the March 1980 issue of Inside Wrestling. Thanks for watching.